In the heart of a vibrant village called Nkolikah, nestled between thick, lush forests and flowing rivers, a tight-knit community lived in harmony with their ancient traditions. The village was filled with colorful markets, lively gatherings, and the sounds of children playing. It was a place where stories were passed down from generation to generation, and the bonds of family and friendship ran deep. Yet, behind the beauty and serenity of this peaceful village, there was a darker, hidden story, a tale of love, pain, and eventual redemption. At the center of this story was Kofi, a proud and wealthy farmer who had earned his fortune through hard work. To the villagers, Kofi was a symbol of success, respected, admired, and seemingly the perfect man. But behind his charming facade, Kofi harbored a cruel streak that few knew of. He ruled his household with an iron fist, and his beautiful wife, Yasira, bore the brunt of his anger. Despite her elegance and kindness, Yasira lived a life of quiet suffering. Trapped in a marriage that seemed to offer no escape, her heart ached with every cruel word and every harsh action, but she remained silent, hoping for change that never came. Yasira's life was one of enduring pain in silence, not because she lacked strength, but because she believed her love for Kofi would one day soften his heart. But as the days passed, her hope began to fade, replaced by the weight of an unbearable reality. She spent her days in the shadows, silently crying, her dreams of happiness slowly slipping away. No one in the village knew the extent of her suffering. Yasira wore her pain like a mask, hiding behind a facade of grace and composure. But there was one person in the village who saw beyond the surface, the wise elder, Abeni. Abeni lived on the outskirts of Nkolikah, a healer with deep knowledge of the village's secrets and spiritual practices. She was known for her wisdom, and people often turned to her for guidance and healing. Abeni had seen many things in her life, but nothing touched her heart like the quiet suffering of Yasira. She knew that Yasira was not just a victim, but a woman with untapped strength, waiting for the right moment to awaken it. Abeni had a deep understanding of the spiritual forces that governed their world, and knew that Yasira's destiny was much greater than she could imagine. It was Abeni who saw the flicker of hope in Yasira's eyes, the faintest spark that told her the woman was capable of much more than she realized. So, Abeni took Yasira under her wing, teaching her the ways of healing, both physical and spiritual. She helped Yasira discover the strength she had within herself, and with every lesson, Yasira grew more and more empowered. Little did Kofi know, his wife was beginning to transform, not just on the outside, but from the inside out. The village of Nkolikah, so full of ancient stories and wisdom, was about to witness a tale of courage and resilience like no other. Yasira and Kofi's wedding was the talk of Nkolikah. It was a grand celebration, one that everyone in the village attended. The air was filled with joy as villagers danced, sang, and feasted in honor of the beautiful couple. Kofi, dressed in the finest clothes, stood proudly beside Yasira, whose beauty shone like the morning sun. They were seen as the perfect match, a powerful farmer with the graceful and delicate Yasira. The village buzzed with excitement, convinced that the couple's love would be as unshakable as the towering trees that surrounded their village. But as the days passed, the picture-perfect marriage began to show cracks. At first, Kofi's pride seemed like a harmless trait, a man simply confident in his success. Yasira, coming from a humble background, was willing to overlook his arrogance. She loved him deeply and believed that their bond would grow stronger with time. However, Kofi's temper soon began to emerge, and it wasn't long before small signs of his cruelty became too difficult to ignore. It started with the little things, insults disguised as jokes, dismissive remarks in front of the villagers, and the constant undermining of Yasira's worth. When they were alone, Kofi would belittle her, making her feel small, as though her opinions and desires didn't matter. The cruel words stung, but Yasira, ever the peacemaker, would silently endure, hoping that things would improve. She kept her emotions hidden, fearing that showing any weakness would only make matters worse. Kofi's behavior grew more erratic over time. He would deny Yasira the things she loved most, her favorite foods, a visit to the market with friends, or the joy of a quiet evening by the fire. Her happiness seemed like a distant memory, as if Kofi had slowly stripped her of it, bit by bit. Whenever Yasira tried to speak up, to voice her feelings or ask for something simple, Kofi would respond with a sharp word or a cold silence. He'd laugh off her concerns, dismissing them as trivial. Yasira tried desperately to keep the peace, believing that if she was patient enough, Kofi's anger would subside, that if she loved him enough, he would change. But with each passing day, the weight of her loneliness grew heavier. She no longer recognized the man she had married, the man who once seemed so loving and kind. The man standing before her now was one full of pride and cruelty, hiding behind a veil of arrogance. Despite her pain, Yasira never let anyone see her suffering. She maintained a graceful, serene appearance, always smiling when people were around, trying to convince herself that things would get better. The villagers, too, saw only the outward image of a happy marriage. They saw a woman who was blessed to have such a powerful husband, and they whispered in admiration of Kofi's success. But no one knew the truth. No one knew that behind closed doors, Yasira was silently weeping, her heart breaking with every cruel word that Kofi threw her way. In her heart, Yasira held on to a glimmer of hope, believing that perhaps one day Kofi would come to understand her pain, and their marriage would return to the happiness they had once shared. But deep down, she knew the road ahead would be long and uncertain. As the months passed, the cracks in Yasira and Kofi's marriage widened, revealing a side of Kofi that no one had seen before. His behavior, once just arrogant, now became increasingly cruel. The man who had once vowed to love and cherish her now mocked her appearance, making cruel remarks about the way she looked. "You look so tired, Yasira. Maybe if you spent less time dreaming and more time taking care of yourself, you wouldn't look so worn out," he would sneer, his words dripping with disdain. These comments, designed to hurt, began to chip away at Yasira's self-esteem, leaving her feeling smaller and more insignificant each day. But it didn't stop there. Kofi began insulting Yasira's intelligence, dismissing her thoughts and ideas as foolish. "What would you know about this?" he would scoff whenever she tried to speak her mind. "You're just a simple village girl, not some great thinker like me." His words stung like poison, cutting deeper than anything Yasira had ever felt. She had always been intelligent and thoughtful, but now Kofi's constant belittling made her doubt herself, made her question her worth. As time went on, the insults became more frequent, more deliberate. Kofi would laugh at Yasira's misfortunes, mocking her when things didn't go as planned. If she made a mistake or something went wrong, Kofi would find amusement in her failure. "Look at you," he'd say, laughing cruelly, "always messing up. How could anyone ever respect you?" It was as if her pain was a joke to him, a source of entertainment for his bruised ego. Yasira, though devastated, would force a smile, trying her best to ignore the sting of his words. But inside, she was breaking. In the privacy of their home, Yasira would often retreat to a corner, where the tears she had been holding back would finally pour out. Her sobs were quiet, so quiet that even the wind seemed to whisper in sympathy. She cried for the love that had faded away, for the man who no longer saw her as a partner, but as an object to be ridiculed. She cried for the dreams she had once had, dreams of a life full of love and happiness, dreams that were slipping through her fingers like sand. But despite the tears, Yasira kept her pain hidden from the world. She confided in no one, not even her closest friends, because she feared being judged, feared being seen as weak. She believed that somehow she was trapped in a loveless marriage, with no way out. The silence she kept was deafening. Every day, she faced Kofi's insults and mockery, all while wearing a mask of composure for the outside world. The village still saw her as the perfect wife, the beautiful and graceful Yasira, but no one knew the truth. No one knew the emotional torture she endured behind closed doors. She felt as if she was suffocating, slowly dying inside, all while pretending that everything was okay. Yasira held on to a fragile hope, a tiny spark in her heart that one day, somehow, Kofi would change. She clung to the belief that his cruel words were just a phase, that beneath the anger, there was still the man she had fallen in love with. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, that hope began to fade. She felt like she was drowning, caught in a sea of pain with no lifeline in sight. Still, Yasira didn't give up entirely. Deep inside, a part of her believed that love could heal even the deepest wounds. But for now, she was just surviving, hoping for a change that seemed farther away with every passing day. One night, after a long day of working on the farm, Yasira tried to prepare a special meal for Kofi. She had always enjoyed cooking for him, hoping it would bring them closer. But tonight, things went terribly wrong. She had never been the best cook, and the stew she prepared didn't turn out quite the way she'd hoped. It was a small mistake, one that could have been easily overlooked. But for Kofi, it was the perfect excuse to unleash his anger. As soon as he tasted the meal and realized it wasn't up to his standards, His face twisted with disgust. His eyes narrowed as he stared at her, and Yasira felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "You're useless," he snapped, his voice harsh. "I work hard every day, and this is how you repay me." His anger, which had been building up for days, now exploded in full force. Before Yasira could even respond, Kofi's fist struck her across the face. She stumbled back, the sting of the blow burning on her cheek. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional toll it took on her. Kofi didn't stop there. He continued to yell at her, his words like knives slicing through her heart. "You can't even get a simple meal right. You're nothing," he roared, his laughter cruel and mocking. Yasira's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't fight back. She never fought back. Instead, she stood there, silent, as his words cut deeper and deeper. Every insult, every harsh word, felt like a blow to her very soul. But this time, it wasn't just the insults that broke her, it was the violence, the way Kofi had no care for her pain. His laughter as she cried made her feel small, like she was nothing more than an object for him to control. In that moment, something inside Yasira snapped. The woman who had been so hopeful, so loving, was no longer the same. The abuse, the cruelty, the humiliation, it was too much to bear. She couldn't take it anymore. Her body and mind gave way to the overwhelming pain, and before she even realized it, she fell to the ground, unconscious from the force of the beating and the emotional weight pressing down on her chest. When Yasira finally regained consciousness, the world around her felt different. She was disoriented, her head spinning as she slowly opened her eyes. The first thing she noticed was the silence, eerily still, as if the world outside had stopped moving. As her vision cleared, she realized with a growing sense of dread that she was alone. She was locked in the house. The door was bolted shut, and the windows were tightly barred. She had no way to escape. Her heart pounded in her chest, and panic began to set in. How had it come to this? How had the love she once felt for Kofi turned into this nightmare? Yasira's chest tightened as she tried to sit up, her body sore from the beating. She touched her face, feeling the swelling where Kofi had struck her. The pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the crushing weight of realization that now settled on her shoulders. She was trapped. The man she had once loved, the man who had promised to protect her, had turned into her captor. The walls of their home, once a place of comfort, now felt like a prison. As she lay there, tears streaming down her face, Yasira finally allowed herself to feel the full extent of her pain. For so long, she had buried her emotions, tried to convince herself that things would get better. But now, she knew the truth. Kofi wasn't going to change. He had never loved her the way she had loved him, and the pain she had suffered for so long was not a sign of love. It was a sign of his control, his need to dominate her. In the darkness of that locked room, Yasira made a decision. She wouldn't be a prisoner any longer. No matter how hard it was, no matter the fear that held her in place, she would find a way out. She would find a way to reclaim her life. This was her breaking point, and it was the beginning of her journey to freedom. After the traumatic night when Yasira had reached her breaking point, something inside her began to shift. As she lay in the quiet of her locked room, her body aching and her heart broken, she realized that she couldn't go on living this way. She couldn't stay in the cage Kofi had built for her, no matter how hard it felt to take the first step. With newfound determination, Yasira decided to seek help, to find a way out of the darkness that had consumed her for so long. That's when she thought of Abeni, the wise elder who lived on the outskirts of the village. Abeni was known for her healing skills and her deep knowledge of ancient spiritual practices that could help anyone who sought her guidance. When Yasira made her way to Abeni's humble hut, she was welcomed with open arms, and her story poured out. Abeni listened patiently, her gentle eyes filled with understanding. She saw the pain Yasira had been carrying, the weight of years spent in silence, but she also saw the strength that still lay buried deep within her. "You've been hurt, Yasira," Abeni said softly, "but you are not broken. You still have the power to heal yourself." Those words, simple yet profound, were the spark Yasira needed. For the first time in a long while, she felt hope stir inside her, a glimmer of something she had thought was lost forever. Abeni began to teach Yasira the art of healing, both physical and emotional. She showed her how to care for her body with herbs and natural remedies, soothing the pain that had been inflicted on her by Kofi's cruel hands. Yasira's body started to heal, but it was her spirit that truly needed mending. Abeni taught her how to nurture her inner strength, how to silence the voice of self-doubt that had been planted in her by Kofi's cruel words. "The greatest power lies within you," Abeni would say, and it begins with loving yourself first. Over time, Yasira began to change. She no longer shrank from Kofi's harsh words or his cruel actions. She stood tall, even when he tried to belittle her. The woman who had once been afraid to speak up now found her voice. And with each word of defiance, each act of self-love, she felt herself growing stronger. But Abeni didn't stop there. She also taught Yasira the ancient knowledge of spiritual practices that had been passed down through generations. These practices were not just about healing, they were about taking control of one's destiny. Yasira learned how to connect with the earth, how to harness the energy of the universe, and how to protect herself from the negativity that surrounded her. Through meditation and ritual, Yasira found the power to reclaim her life. The once fragile woman who had been beaten down by the weight of her marriage began to awaken into a force to be reckoned with. She learned to channel the energy of the earth, to strengthen her resolve, to find peace, even in the midst of chaos. Abeni's teachings weren't just about surviving, they were about thriving, about understanding that true power came from within. As Yasira's transformation took hold, she became more than just a woman who had endured abuse. She became a symbol of resilience and strength, a living testament to the power of self-love and inner healing. No longer would she be controlled by Kofi's cruelty. She had learned to rise above it, to find her own path and walk it with confidence. And with each day, Yasira felt herself becoming the woman she was always meant to be, strong, confident, and in control of her own destiny. The woman who once cowered in fear now stood tall, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Yasira had not only healed physically, she had healed emotionally and spiritually, and now nothing could stop her from reclaiming the life she deserved. As Yasira's transformation continued, she found herself changing in ways she had never imagined. The woman who once cowered in the shadow of Kofi's cruelty was now beginning to stand tall. She no longer allowed his harsh words to define her. Every insult, every mocking laugh that had once broken her now seemed less powerful, less capable of reaching her heart. Yasira had finally found her voice, and with it, she started to reclaim the control Kofi had stolen from her for so long. Her quiet strength began to shine through, and it wasn't long before the villagers began to notice the change. At first, it was subtle, a new confidence in the way she carried herself, a spark of defiance in her eyes. People who had once seen her as meek and timid were starting to see a different side of her. Yasira began to engage more with the villagers, helping with tasks, offering kind words, and even sharing the healing knowledge Abeni had taught her. It was clear to everyone that she wasn't the same woman who had walked into Abeni's home months ago. But for Kofi, this change was like a slap in the face. He had always controlled Yasira, used her silence to his advantage, and now that power was slipping away. He noticed the way she walked with her head held high, the way she no longer flinched when he spoke to her in a cruel tone. Yasira was standing up for herself, and that was something Kofi couldn't tolerate. His anger grew, his temper flaring every time he saw Yasira smile or speak with a newfound confidence. He no longer saw the woman he could dominate. He saw someone who was becoming her own person, someone who was no longer afraid of him. The more Kofi's control over her faded, the more frustrated he became. His jealousy grew, fueled by the realization that Yasira was finding a life outside of his influence. When Yasira started making decisions for herself, whether it was spending time with the villagers or working on projects that made her feel proud, Kofi's rage reached new heights. He couldn't stand the idea that Yasira was no longer his puppet, no longer willing to accept the role he had forced upon her. One evening, as Yasira returned home from helping Abeni with a healing ceremony, she found Kofi waiting for her at the door, his eyes dark with anger. "Where have you been?" he barked, his voice sharp. "You think you can just run around with the villagers while I'm here working like a fool?" Yasira's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. "I was helping Abeni," she replied calmly, her voice steady. "I'm learning to help others, just like she taught me." Kofi's face twisted with rage at her response. He stepped forward, grabbing her by the arm, shaking her violently. "You think you're better than me now?" he sneered. Yasira's body tensed under his grip, but she refused to let his anger shake her. "No, Kofi, I'm not better than you, but I'm not yours to control anymore," she said, her voice low but full of conviction. For a moment, Kofi was silent, his grip tightening on her arm. But Yasira didn't flinch. She didn't beg him to stop. Her calmness only fueled his fury. He let go of her arm, stepping back, his eyes wild with frustration. "You'll regret this, Yasira," he spat, before turning and storming off. Yasira watched him leave, her heart racing, but her spirit unbroken. She knew this was the moment. The struggle for her independence had begun, and there was no turning back. Though Kofi's rage continued to simmer, Yasira was no longer afraid. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. Kofi would fight her every step of the way, trying to pull her back into the chains of control he had once held so tightly. But Yasira was ready. She had found her strength, her voice, and now she would fight to keep them. She would no longer let fear rule her life. Her struggle for independence had just begun, and this time she would be the one in control of her own destiny. After years of enduring pain and silence, Yasira finally found something she thought had been lost forever: herself. The woman who once lived under the weight of Kofi's cruelty had rediscovered a love for life she never thought she would feel again. As the days passed, she realized that the strength she had been searching for wasn't just about surviving. It was about truly living, about waking up each day with hope in her heart. Yasira's transformation wasn't just physical or emotional. It was a deep, soul-changing shift that had nothing to do with Kofi or anyone else. It was all about her reclaiming the life that was always meant to be hers. She began to smile again, but this smile wasn't forced, nor was it out of obligation. It was a genuine smile, one that came from deep within, a reflection of the inner peace she had fought so hard to find. When Yasira smiled now, it was with a sense of freedom, of knowing that she had control over her life, and no one could take that away from her. The darkness that had once clouded her days had lifted, replaced by the warm light of self-love and acceptance. Each new day brought with it a sense of possibility, a chance to continue growing, to explore the world on her terms. For Kofi, however, this change did not go unnoticed. He watched as Yasira began to blossom, and with every step she took away from him, his own frustration grew. He couldn't help but notice the way she held her head high now, the way she laughed freely with the villagers, the way she radiated confidence and peace. Yasira was no longer the woman who would cower at his words or beg for his approval. She was someone new, someone independent, someone who had finally found the strength to rise above him. And though a part of him recognized this, a part of him wanted to break her again, to remind her who had been in control. But he couldn't. He had lost her, and he knew it. Kofi's heart sank as the realization hit him. The woman he once controlled, the woman who had been entirely dependent on him, was gone. In her place was someone he no longer recognized. Yasira had become a force of her own, and he couldn't stop her. He had thought he could always push her around, make her feel small, but now he saw the strength in her eyes, a strength that reflected the hard journey she had endured. And in that moment, he realized how much he had taken her for granted, how much he had broken her without ever considering what would happen if she ever learned to stand on her own. But it was too late. Yasira was no longer the quiet, beaten-down woman who would accept his cruelty. She was someone entirely different, someone who knew her worth. She had found herself, and in doing so, she had found a new purpose in life. Kofi could no longer be a part of that life, not in the way he had been before. Yasira was free, and though she still carried the scars of her past, those scars were no longer marks of shame. They were symbols of survival, of resilience, of the woman she had become. The return of love wasn't just about Yasira finding the courage to love herself again. It was also about Kofi realizing that his control had destroyed the very thing he had once valued. He had lost the woman he had loved, but in his pursuit of power over her, he had forgotten the most important thing of all. Love cannot thrive in a place of cruelty. Now, as Yasira embraced her freedom, her inner peace, and the love she had for herself, it was clear. It was too late for Kofi to win her back. She had already moved on, and this time, it was her own love for life that would guide her. One fateful night, Kofi could no longer stand seeing Yasira's strength. It tore at him, this woman who had once bowed to his every whim, now standing tall, radiating confidence. He had expected her to fall back into the person she used to be, the one who would cower before him and beg for his forgiveness. But Yasira had changed. She had found her voice, and there was no going back. Her smile, steady and unwavering, was a sharp contrast to the rage bubbling up inside Kofi. He couldn't handle the truth that Yasira was no longer his to control. Her transformation, her independence, had humiliated him, and now he felt threatened, emasculated, like a man who had lost his grip on everything he thought he owned. Kofi stormed into the house, his eyes wild with fury, his fists clenched. "You think you can defy me?" he spat, his voice low but filled with venom. Yasira stood in the middle of the room, her back straight and her eyes calm. She had seen this moment coming. She knew Kofi's pride wouldn't let him go down without a fight. But this time, she wasn't afraid. This time, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Yasira's smile remained, her gaze steady, as if she had already won the battle within herself. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Kofi," Yasira said, her voice calm but full of strength. Her words hit him harder than any physical blow. They stung, reminding him that he no longer had the power to manipulate her, to control her like he once had. His fists trembled with anger, and before he could stop himself, he lunged toward her, aiming to strike her just as he had so many times before. But Yasira was ready. Over the years, she had learned more than just physical healing from Abeni. She had discovered the power of spiritual strength, a strength that came from within and reached beyond the physical. She had grown stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. In the past, she might have flinched, might have begged him to stop, but not tonight, not anymore. As Kofi raised his hand, Yasira closed her eyes for a moment, drawing on the ancient knowledge Abeni had taught her. The deep spiritual practices that had been passed down through generations filled her, grounding her like roots of a mighty tree. She stood firm, unshaken. The moment Kofi's hand descended, Yasira raised her own, not to strike, but to block. It wasn't a violent defense. It was a peaceful yet powerful act of self-protection. She felt the spiritual strength surge through her, and for the first time, Kofi's blow was stopped, not by force, but by the calm, unyielding power of Yasira's will. Kofi's fist met an invisible barrier, a force that seemed to push back against him. His eyes widened in shock, disbelief flashing across his face. "What is this?" he shouted, stumbling back. Yasira didn't respond with anger or hatred. She didn't need to. The power she had gathered over the years wasn't just about fighting back. It was about standing her ground with dignity and peace. She had come to understand that the greatest strength lay not in violence, but in inner peace. "You have no power over me anymore, Kofi," Yasira said softly, but her voice was like thunder in the stillness of the room. "You've taken everything from me, but you'll never take my spirit. I'm free, and I'll never go back to the person I was." Kofi stood there, frozen, his breath heavy in his chest. For the first time, he saw Yasira not as the woman he could dominate, but as someone whose strength could no longer be broken. The man who had once controlled her was now at the mercy of her calm resilience. Yasira had found something that Kofi had never understood. True power wasn't in control over others, but in the freedom of being able to control oneself. The room fell silent. Kofi's rage subsided as the weight of Yasira's words sank in. She had won, not with violence, not with revenge, but with the quiet strength of a woman who had learned to stand for herself. Kofi, for all his attempts to dominate her, could only watch as Yasira walked away, her smile still unwavering. And this time, it wasn't just a smile. It was the smile of a woman who had finally taken back her life. As Kofi's hand swung toward Yasira, something strange and powerful happened. The moment his fist was in the air, the earth beneath him trembled as if responding to the force that Yasira had awakened within herself. Her inner strength, which she had nurtured over the years, had transformed into something more than just spiritual resilience. It was a force that seemed to ripple through the very fabric of the world around them. The air grew thick with energy, and for the first time, Kofi felt an unfamiliar fear. Kofi had always been the one in control, the one who made others cower in fear. But now, he was the one being controlled by forces he couldn't understand. Yasira, standing with unwavering calm, watched as the man who had tormented her for years began to falter. It wasn't just her voice that had changed, it was her spirit, now infused with a power that no one in the village had ever seen. Yasira's smile, once a quiet sign of sorrow, now became her weapon, a symbol of everything she had overcome. The ground beneath Kofi's feet cracked, a deep rumbling sound echoing through the village. The earth seemed to swallow him up as the power emanating from Yasira spread like wildfire. Kofi's face contorted in pain, his body jerking uncontrollably, as if the very elements had turned against him. His cries filled the air, but they weren't the sounds of anger or defiance anymore. They were screams of agony, as if the earth itself was rejecting him. Blood began to trickle from his eyes, a grotesque sight that sent chills through the villagers who watched in awe and horror. Yasira's strength had done what no one thought possible. It had broken him. The man who had once laughed at her pain was now writhing in it, unable to escape the force he had awakened. With each scream, the ground around him cracked further, and the earth seemed to consume him more and more. Yasira stood still, her eyes calm, her smile serene. The power within her had not come from vengeance. It came from the purity of her spirit, from the years of suffering that had finally found release. She had broken free, and now the very world around her was showing Kofi what it meant to underestimate a woman's strength. The villagers gathered, watching in disbelief as the once proud Kofi was reduced to a shell of the man he had been. His cries grew more desperate, more frantic, but the more he struggled, the more the earth seemed to tighten its grip on him. The cracks in the ground grew wider, swallowing everything in their path, and soon Kofi was engulfed by the very land he had once controlled. His body deteriorated before the eyes of the villagers, as if the earth was reclaiming him for the pain he had caused. The laughter that had once filled his home now felt like a distant memory, replaced by the horrifying cries of a man who had been consumed by his own cruelty. Yasira, standing outside the chaos, watched as Kofi's reign of terror came to an end. Her smile, calm and steady, was a stark contrast to the madness unfolding before her eyes. The village had witnessed the final downfall of a man who had once thought he could break her, but instead, it was he who had been broken. As the ground settled, the villagers saw that Kofi was gone, his body nothing but dust, his name erased from the earth. Yasira, now free from his torment, stood tall. The village that had once whispered about her suffering now whispered about her strength. She had not only survived the storm, she had become the storm, and in doing so, she had reclaimed her power and her life. Kofi's tragic end left the village in shock, his once proud figure now nothing but a painful memory. The man who had ruled with arrogance and cruelty, who had tormented his wife and belittled those around him, was gone. His downfall had come swiftly and violently, as if the very universe had turned against him. But amidst the grief and the sorrow that followed his death, Yasira stood as a symbol of something far more powerful: strength, resilience, and an unbreakable spirit. The village, once silent and fearful of Kofi's temper, now spoke of Yasira in awe. She had faced unimaginable suffering, yet she had risen above it all. No longer the meek and broken woman she once was, Yasira had transformed into a beacon of hope for everyone who had ever been oppressed or silenced. Her journey was a testament to the power of inner strength, the kind of strength that no wealth, no position, and no cruelty could ever diminish. As time passed, the villagers began to reflect on the lessons that Yasira's story had taught them. They saw that true power doesn't come from wealth or force, but from the ability to find peace within oneself, even in the face of adversity. They realized that no matter how much power someone may hold, or how much they may try to intimidate, they are no match for a person who has found their inner peace and strength. Yasira's transformation had been more than just a change in appearance or behavior. It was a profound shift in how she viewed herself and the world around her. She had found the courage to stand up for herself, to seek help when she needed it, and to embrace the spiritual strength that had always been within her. In doing so, she had not only saved herself, but had also set an example for others to follow. The villagers saw that when a person taps into their own power, when they learn to trust themselves and their abilities, they become unstoppable. And so, as Kofi's name faded into the past, Yasira's became synonymous with resilience. Her smile, once a sign of sorrow, now represented triumph. The villagers began to understand that no one, no matter how rich or powerful, could ever defeat someone who had found their inner peace. They learned that their strength didn't lie in material things, but in their hearts, their will, and their ability to rise above hardship. In the end, Yasira's story became a lesson for generations to come. It was a reminder that no matter how dark things may seem, there is always a way to break free, that even the deepest pain can be transformed into a source of power, and that the greatest strength anyone can have is the courage to stand tall, even when the world seems to be against them. Kofi's cruelty had led him to his demise, but Yasira's strength had led her to a new beginning, a life of peace, joy, and the unwavering knowledge that true power comes from within. If Yasira's journey has touched your heart, if her strength and resilience have inspired you to believe that no matter how hard life gets, you can rise above it, then this story is for you. Yasira's transformation is a powerful reminder that no one, no matter how cruel or powerful, can defeat a person who has found their inner peace. Her journey teaches us that true strength comes from within, and no matter how dark the path may seem, there's always a way to break free. Kofi's downfall was a result of his own cruelty, but Yasira's rise was a victory of love, self-worth, and courage. Let this story remind you that your worth is not defined by the opinions or actions of others, but by the strength you carry within. If you've ever been told you're not enough or felt powerless, let Yasira's story be the spark that ignites your own transformation. If you felt inspired by this tale, I invite you to like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. Together, let's spread the message of hope and resilience. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that will uplift your spirit and inspire you to believe in the power within you. Thank you for watching, and remember, no matter what, you are stronger than you think. Stay strong, stay inspired, and keep believing in yourself.